Dear colleagues, dear friends of the EUI, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome in the Sala Teatro of the European University Institute for this dissemination conference of the European Union Democracy Observatory, part of the Robert Schuman Center activity. Okay, in a short sentence, I have described to you a complex conundrum. First of all, I would like to welcome you here, of course. I'm happy to see so many old friends, in some cases, around this. I'm happy to see how much the network of UDO has grown. I think this is the third, Alex, dissemination conference. We have experimented different formats. Once we did in an hotel nearby the Berlaymont. Then we tried to do it at the European Parliament. The third, we do it here in a university. Then we'll do a budget and we'll see a balance sheet and we'll see which one was the most effective in disseminating the results of UDO. Let me also bring to you the salutation of our president, Professor Maris Cremona, who could not be with us today, but I'm sure she would have liked very much. She's so attached to UDO and to, of course, European Union affairs. Having said so, I discovered yesterday evening, I mean, in the quarter of an hour you devote every evening before a conference to think about what you should say at the opening. Normally what I do is I tell the participants the little story about the EUI, the Robert Schuman Center, and so on and so forth. And I'm afraid many of the people around this table have heard that story too often. For sure, I did hear it too often, and I ended up deciding that I wouldn't do it. And then I was in trouble, saying, what then should I say to this distinguished set of colleagues, apart from passing straight away the floor to Alex. But then I couldn't resist thinking about the title at the top of this page. I read European Union Democracy Observatory, and I thought back at when Alex had the idea, six years ago, I think. Why don't we do this European Observatory? I was enthusiastic about the idea, and now I reread the title. I think the only uncontroversial term is the adjective European. Probably wouldn't fight about that. But we might wonder how much union is up there nowadays. How much we are united. And if you wonder how much you are united, you might also wonder how much democracy. You know, democracy is a demanding procedure that requires a lot of unity before it can be implemented. And it's very unlikely that unite true democracy. And then, observatory, what we should then observe in this situation of weak union and difficult to find democracy. And then I went down to the title of today, the Euro Crisis and the State of European Democracy. And of course, the word crisis loomed very largely in this meeting. I've gone through this very rich program, I mean, a really impressive program of intervention, and the crisis is almost everywhere in this thing. And then I said, but what is crisis? Crisis is a word we use too often. There is crisis everywhere. And it's a term of the common language, if you want. I mean, you know, we use it somehow without thinking very much about it. And then I thought, what is the European crisis? I mean, in the end. And it came to me that I was trying to find a definition for crisis. Of course, some of us would try to take a stronger view about the concept of crisis and say, crises occur when the rules that govern the relationship among the parts of a system cannot be changed following them. That could be a definition of a crisis. if you want to be even more intricate, I had a second thought. You need new rules to change the rule, which you have to follow to change the rule. That's really very complicated. But when I read these two definitions, I really jumped back to my youth when I decided to study political science, because in these two definitions I found you can read them differently. I found the fundamental political predicament that fascinated me when I first began to study politics. That is, politics is an activity without a solution. At the heart of politics, there is an unsolvable problem. How can communities define themselves? Is there any rational rule for a community to define who we are? And as you know, is there a rational way for a community to decide the rules to take decisions? Now, none of this problem has a solution. And that's what makes politics different from law and economics. And this problem is really at the heart of what I call the political predicament. And for those of my generation, we learned that to begin with in political science, when we read about the two founding fathers of our discipline, at least in my vision, of course, which are Niccolò Machiavelli and Thomas Hobbes, because they really had this problem at the heart of their reflection. But if we read the term crisis with these lenses, then the question, I'm afraid, is that perhaps the European Union, with or without democracy, is probably, through the crisis, approaching a moment of political predicament. After a long period of reflection about its legal foundation and the complex legal procedure through which it can progress and perhaps lead us toward a new entity, after a lot of reflection about the economic efficiency and the economic dimension of this enterprise, are we back to the political predicament of any new political formation creation? How can we find rational rules for defining whom we are and to decide what rule we should follow to decide? Which seems to me probably the heart of the problem. So the result of this, let me add something. What I mean by back to politics in a very classic sense. Politics as the necessary discontinuity, necessary exceptionality, founding, constituting an entity. Now, I hope that the results of our reflection, Udo, observation, and the network of people that have been convened here today might help to cast some new light on how to solve the European political predicament. And I'm very hopeful that I will be proven wrong, that we have not yet reached the core of the political predicament. And there are ways to go on, business as usual, to muddle through, without facing the political predicament. So far, we have been graciously and effectively able to avoid the political predicament at the European Union level. And I hope we can continue to do so. But I need to be convinced by this distinguished set of colleagues that indeed we can do. Because unfortunately, if we really face a political predicament, that's not very nice, because political predicament times are not nice times. Are hard times when the future no longer looks like it used to be, and where uncertainty characterizes human activities. Now, I really hope, indeed, that these 2 weeks will be profitable in clarifying to ourselves whether we have ways to avoid what I have defined as the political predicament, and to continue to build without facing that predicament, because that predicament is usually very difficult to solve when it's put in front of us in a sort of very strong way. Okay, with this perhaps somehow pessimistic, but I think useful opening notes, I hope, I'll really wish you 2 days of active and productive intellectual interaction, And in welcoming you again and in thanking you again for being here with us today and tomorrow in the various panel, I pass the floor to Alex. Again, thank you for being all here.